and welcome to Coproduce Care, #Chat for Care. My name is Sophie Chester-Glynn and I'm director at Coproduce Care. And also I work in social care. My mum works in social care. I've been doing this since I was like 3 years old. But also Coproduce Care, I set that up last year. And the whole idea was just to open up the health and social care debate. Just being a little bit frustrated that so much was going on in social care and it never got any airtime. And if you have been following us, if you've been watching what we'll be doing, you will see we have been on a mission to interview as many people, the great and the good, parents. We're coming on to people with lived experience in coming weeks and just trying to give a platform for people to have in-depth discussion about health and social care. So we started end of last year and now we're coming up to the summer, and soon we would have been a year old, I think, in a few months' time. So we're super fresh and we just want as much support as possible, and we want to represent as many voices in social care as we can, and we can do as many videos as we want, but they're pointless if we don't have people engaging and watching and sharing. So our big ask, as always, if you are watching on YouTube, if you can just click on the subscribe button and click on the bell. That just makes a whole heap of difference. It costs nothing, but it means that more people will see us. It'll come up on their feeds. And also, if you're on Twitter, then #chat4care. Some comments, some thoughts, anything. Let's get the discussion going. Some people have stopped clapping for carers. That's fine, but we will not. Oh, this sounds really corny, but we won't stop chatting for care. We just want to keep the discussion going no matter what. And we have got a fantastic guest on today. In fact, if you've been with us before, you'll see we've interviewed people, in our studio, and we've done that before lockdown, and we had this meeting scheduled with Mandu Reid from the Women's Equality Party, and we just kept it in the diary, and now we're doing it on live stream. So even though we can't meet in person, we can talk over technology, which is fantastic. And the Women's Equality Party has really picked up on the issues within social care and how they, inadvertently are helping women really suffer in a way because we don't have enough equality. And we just want to talk today about why that is. We want to find out more about the Women's Equality Party, explore those issues, and also some of the fantastic things that Mandu and her team have been doing in terms of campaigning. And there was even a march recently, socially distanced march. People were just supporting in so many different ways. And I know I've wanted to see something like this for forever, for like as long as I can remember, and it's finally happening, and getting their support behind it is absolutely wonderful to see. So I'm super excited to be with Mandu, and also we'll be talking about the Women's Equality Party. Excuse me, if you've never heard of it, you want to find out more, then she'll be letting us know. And she'll be talking about the issues that we see around pay and protection, and it's stuff that is now in the public domain that wasn't there before. And obviously if you're in care, you know about it. If you're not, then you're new to it, but it's great how people have picked this up. So we'll be talking about that and some of the fantastic things that they've been doing. But before I introduce Mandu, I just want to give out a bit of a shout out, a kind of call to action. There is the Health and Social Care Committee doing a call for evidence, they call it, but they're doing an inquiry into social care funding and also the social care workforce. Now, I thought that is, the great thing to be thinking about right now. But we want to get your voices into that debate. So we're doing a joint consultation response to this inquiry, and we've shared and reshared a Survey Monkey that we're doing. So we cut out all of the kind of bureaucracy for everybody. You just have to fill out a questionnaire, and we will put that all together. We'll theme it, and we'll supply recommendations to the Health and Social Care Committee. So we'll put the link in the description. If you follow us at Copro Care, then you'll see we've tweeted about it a lot, but the timeline has been shortened. So the deadline to put in all the submissions is the end of this week. So we need to have your responses really by Wednesday so we can put it all together. So if you can sort of take part in that, and just fill it out, and just tell us how do you think the social care workforce should be supported? How should it be rewarded? How do we stop people coming into social care and then coming straight back out? Maybe we don't want to think about the negatives of health and social care, or social care in particular in this case. We want to focus on the positives. What are we doing in social care which makes us unique from health, not just there to support the NHS? So all of those ideas and more, we want to hear from you. We don't want to just make our own submission. We just want to help give a platform for other people to have their voices and opinions heard. Okay, so enough of my babble. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like, share. People are on their lunch breaks. Help them to come along and enjoy the chat with us while they're chilling out for half an hour, enjoying the sun or whatever else. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Mandu. Hello, Mandu. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you, Sophie? Thank you so much for having me on the show. And can I just say, huge admiration and respect to you, your mother, everybody that's been involved in the whole, endeavor that you've set up over the last year. It's really important. You couldn't have foreseen COVID, of course, but it's double, triple important now in the context of the crisis the world is facing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'm just absolutely in awe of all the stuff that you're doing. All of this stuff has been highlighted to you, the issues within social care and the workforce, how it disproportionately affects women and what that means. And you've just taken it. So maybe anyone who's new to the Women's Equality Party doesn't know what you are, what you stand for in general. You could maybe just give us a bit of an introduction on that.
Yeah, sure. We are the first and only feminist political party in Britain. We were founded 5 years ago, so we're very much new kids on the block when it comes to the political scene. We exist because none of the other political parties and most of the politicians in this country, none of them are sufficiently ambitious enough about equality between men and women. So we are here to fill that gap. And actually, just to kind of slightly adjust one of the things you said in introduction, social care has always been front and center for us. It's not something that we've just noticed now that this crisis is going on, in the same way as lots of other political parties and politicians have suddenly noticed that social care is a big issue. It's been a core part of our manifesto, and we're different from a normal political party because actually we're trying to do ourselves out of business. We want to get to the point where the Women's Equality Party isn't needed at all. And in order to do that, we've zoomed in on 7 areas. And I'll just run through super quickly what they are. Equal parenting and caregiving, one of our top policy areas. Equal pay, ending violence against women and girls. Equal media, equal health, equal education, and equal representation. So those 7 things, if they can be achieved, we can get to the point where men and women are truly equal citizens in this country. Without those things, we ain't going to get there. And you don't see those things prominent enough in other political parties' manifestos. So that's what we're there to do. Those issues will never be a footnote for us. But when they're achieved, we can step back and move on. We are not there to secure our own power, to dominate the political scene, or power for power's sake. We are here because we want change.
And do you feel that people are listening to you? Do you feel that you're getting through to, whether it's people on the ground or, because change can happen bottom up anywhere, but there's a lot of power at the top. Are they listening to you?
I'm going to tell you the truth, Sophie. It's a hustle. It's a struggle. The political system that we have makes it very difficult for new voices or small parties to get a foothold. But we haven't let that stop us. In the last 5 years, we've gone from just being a good idea somebody had to having 70 branches up and down the country, 30,000 members and supporters across the country, fighting in elections. We won our first local council seat last year ahead of schedule. We are in influencing the debate. And one of the really interesting things that happens is when we argue powerfully for the issues that matter to us, like social care, right? What it does is it improves the levels of engagement that the other more mainstream political players have on these issues, because they want to neutralize our impact. So we always say, steal our ideas, take them. And that is a big part of how we do business, which differentiates us from others. And so it's not easy. We have much fewer resources than the big players out there. But for our size, we are definitely exerting an impact. And one of the things we do that disrupts the way politics works is we have this thing that I call political polyamory. Now, what that means is that you can be a member of our party and a member of another party, and we have no problem with that. Because there are people, maybe your grandfather was a trade unionist or something like that. So you have a strong affiliation to the Labour Party, for example. Well, as far as we're concerned, bring that passion for the things you believe in alongside us, who was zooming in on making equality between men and women a reality. And we're cool with that. Other parties, they don't like it. They're a little bit old fashioned when it comes to how people express their political affiliation. So you can be a member of our party and a member of another party, and we're cool with that, because it means the political energy that gets kind of dissatisfied and frustrated in other spheres can be expressed and channeled via what we're going for. And by the way, we call it the Women's Equality Party, but men are more than welcome to be in the mix with us. And in fact, I want to see the proportion of men in our membership increase as we go, because fighting alongside one another is the way we can get to where we need to be.
Great. And that's a shout out to anyone who has a father, brother, brother-in-law, granddad. Get them involved. And we've got all the details of how to find out more about the Women's Equality Party that you can share, reshare. It's in the description. We'll be putting it in the chat. It's been on the screen, so there's no excuse. So that's really good, and it's really good to let out that people can take the ideas that you're talking about and then just spread, because that's a lot of the problem. People just do not know, and they don't have an awareness, or if they, you're listening to the news and certain things get airtime and certain things get like a 5-minute slot and that's it. So it's about raising that awareness and being really inclusive of people with different political views, but just understanding that we've got this main core base that you're trying to support. I think that's great. So moving on, and also a little bit about you, actually, because you're quite new to the party.
Well, I've been a member for a while, but I became party leader last year in April. And I was initially interim leader because the previous leader, who was our first leader, stood down from the role, and I was appointed to be interim leader. And that made me the very first person of color actually, to lead a national political party in British history. Extraordinary to me that it took until 2019 for that to happen, but that's how long it took. And so it really, in a way, feels like an enormous privilege, but I'm not going to lie to you, it's daunting too, having to kind of be the figurehead of a movement like ours and be the first. There isn't a template for me to follow, and you'll be no stranger to how Black women in the public eye are way more likely to be on the receiving end of abuse and harassment and all of that. So I was fearful, and I still feel intimidated sometimes, but the mission's too important for me to allow that to hold me back in any way.
I never knew. Well, it's obvious really when you say that. You're the first woman of color for a national party, but it is crazy. And also, like, that should be shouted about. That is just such a huge thing. And I know you did an article, I think, in The Guardian, and there has been some press about it, but I'd love to see more like shared, especially in these times when a lot of people say we need representation. And I think it goes more than just representation of having people in different places. That is a part of it, but it's also what you do when you're there. Yeah. And I know that from your, what you've done, I've seen how the party has operated, especially now coming on to care. You've totally tried to involve people. It's less of a kind of, okay, we'll come up with the ideas and then we'll tell you what you need to do. You do, I think, is it chats you do regularly with your members?
Yeah, in conversation sessions, I do those every fortnight where we bring people in to discuss issues that are affecting. I'm sorry, it's my doorbell.
That's okay.
I have no idea who it is. I don't get many visitors these days.
Do you need to get it though? It's fine. I can just
no. This is
okay.
a much more important conversation.
Okay.
No, so in conversation sessions, we have a really important blog series that I started. It's called Pass the Mic. And the whole point of that is to kind of turn on its head this notion that's been popularized recently of, someone makes a definitive point, they feel they've won the argument, and then they drop the mic, right? I don't like that, because in this circumstance, we need to be opening conversations up, not closing them down, And so passing the mic is my antidote to the culture we have in politics, which is so adversarial and privileges certain voices. Pass the mic is about giving people the platforms to express themselves, typically people whose voices and perspectives are frozen out of politics, frozen out of the media. And that will always be part and parcel of how, under my leadership, the Women's Equality Party operates. I'm not interested in just recreating all the underwhelming things, let me be polite, about how politics operates in the mainstream sphere. We're here to disrupt. We are here to give platforms and voices, amplification that don't otherwise get there.
That's brilliant. And that is really insightful. And if more politics was done in that way, I mean, we see it now in how COVID generally has been played out in politics, how medical advice has got political. It's been so hard, but to just approach it like we are just going to listen to you. I think that is so important. And so one of the things you obviously were listening in your Pass the Mic sessions about some of the issues people were going through, but also you interviewed Carolina Gerlich. I hope I said that right. And I didn't manage to do that because I was doing one of these. I didn't manage to attend that one, so I was doing that. One of these at the same time. But what did you learn from her? So she is head of the Care Workers charity, and they've raised a lot of money for care workers to support them in this difficult time. They've had so many different collaborations. I think they've had a T-shirt made that people can buy, and donations come from that. And they've also got like a rainbow pizza, I think, in one of the supermarkets that people could buy, and so just raising money for care workers that hasn't been there before. What kind of things did you learn from your conversation with her?
It was a phenomenal conversation. And first of all, I just want to give big up to Carolina. She's an extraordinary woman. She's worked for many years as a care worker herself, and now is at the helm of this charity. It's a small charity, but it's doing extraordinary work. One of the big campaigns they've been running over the last few months is a campaign for for people to donate money to their charity that then gets made as grants to care workers who are really, really struggling under the weight and pressure of the COVID-19 crisis. Most care workers, for a start, and this is going to clarify why this is such an important subject for the Women's Equality Party. 83% of social care workers are female. And a huge, significant number of them are working in really substandard working conditions for very low, even poverty wages. Okay, and so we have this situation where this enormous workforce, it's in excess of 1.5 million people who are doing really important work that keeps our society together. We are relying on those people through COVID to get us through it. We are relying on them to take risks, and Carolina's work to have to raise money to help them stay afloat financially, survive, make ends meet, just exposes how serious the problem is we're facing in this country. It's not right that people who are performing this really essential work that is about the fabric of our society are relying on a charity that has to do crowdfunding in order to make sure those people can stay afloat financially while we're relying on them to take great risks to look after our loved ones. It isn't right that the kind of care homes network up and down the country, many of the big providers are controlled by extremely wealthy people, pay their staff poverty wages, yet the profits from their endeavors go offshore. It shows you how the system's broken. I mean, the average wage of a care worker is something like, it's less than £8 an hour, right? And when you juxtapose that with the fact that 6 of the wealthiest men in this country, in the top 1,000 wealthiest men in their country, make their fortunes by owning care home empires. You see there's a problem, and you see that they all have offshore bank accounts in the Cayman Islands or wherever. And that, for me, should be ringing alarm bells everywhere. This is everyone's problem. And speaking to Carolina really kind of crystallizes that, because in a crisis, how on earth is it right that what the government's main offer to care workers is a nice badge, and the charity's got to do crowdfunding in order to kind of keep these people afloat who are performing really important work that's holding our society together. So it was really kind of, to be honest, it enrages me when I confront the facts of that. But more people need to know about this, need to understand it, and need to demand better from our government.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I always wonder, why is it that we have this situation? I mean, I've been doing a little bit of reading around it. I was trying to do a PhD before COVID-19, and I've had to pause that because there's so much else going on. But, when I was reading, I read, I think it was The Autonomy Myth by Martha Feynman, and that just a lot of people talking about the idea that work that women do, which was classically sort of seen as unpaid work, shouldn't be paid or valued that much. So if you compare the work of a care worker to that of like a plumber or engineer or something else, like the disparities and what their unions are able to offer them, and I feel like there's a whole history around it that can be unpicked to understand why we do this. But it just seems like in this day and age, we shouldn't be in this position where care workers and care providers are just struggling to get the basics like PPE. I mean, we wouldn't send anybody in the army out, which is probably majority of men in the army, out without shields or a vest or any protection. We just wouldn't do that. But for care workers, it seems like, I mean, there's not even like an apology from the government or anything. Do you understand, like with a political hat on, why these things are left like this?
Do you? I don't understand with a political hat on why they're left like that. I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about the badge and that being the centerpiece of what they had to offer whilst the crisis was literally at its peak? I'm just wondering, like, what your thoughts are on that.
So I actually interviewed Robin Batchelor, who created the badge last year. The thing is, what you have to understand is, coming from a position where, I've watched my mum do social care. She was a psychiatric nurse, and then she decided to care for people in our own home. So we've been looking after people in our own house since I was like 3. And then she opened up a small care home, which when she passed in 2010, I've carried on doing that. So that's my other care kind of like job. And we've always been in conversations, like whether you work in care, whatever, you're always second best to health. Like even if you're in like a care planning meeting, if a health worker who doesn't know someone you support well says something, but you disagree with it because you know that person better, people will always take the health professional's view. Like, so we're starting from such a low base that when the care badge came along, I was like, oh, this is just a care badge. But I also felt, oh, thank goodness we have something. Because every time that you see a politician, like it was the Department of Health forever, and then suddenly it was the Department of Health and Social Care, that for us was like, it's small wins. It's small wins that kind of mean a lot. So when the badge came along, I was like, okay, this is another small gain, because it's almost like you feel it's going to take so long, like change does take so long, and these incremental tiny bits, you kind of grab it and think, well, it's something. But then what frustrates me is when, so when Robin Batchelor did it, and Every Life Technologies brought that out, I thought that's great, they're doing that, because I know that needs to change. But it's what's done now that the government has taken it over, because I think then it looks like that's their get out clause. They've got a badge. All that people need is a badge, and they can go out and die because they don't have PPA, but we've given them a badge. So it's what's done after that and on top of that. And this is where these discussions like you've had with Carolina and the protests and everything else need to then kind of lead to action. Just keep pushing for the real tangible stuff like the wages and pensions and all that.
So when the badge came out last year, you know, cool. Like there's an NHS badge which has like, you know, some status associated with it. I've got no problem with it in that context. I have a problem with it being, there being a kind of pretense of it being a new thing at the height of the crisis, when actually the real issues are PPE and the working conditions and the pay of this really kind of mission critical workforce. So for me, the badge is fine as a symbolic gesture, but it's not fine if there isn't anything more of substance that underpins it. And that's where the issue of this being really political comes in. You were so on the money when you said there's a historical precedent of women's work being undervalued, underappreciated, and often underpaid. Our unpaid work props up the economy. There's no doubt about it. It's been valued at £77 billion a year. Women's unpaid labor contributes to the economy. So if we stopped performing that unpaid labor, the economy would grind to a halt. But the issue of it being unpaid spills over into these paid professions that are dominated by women as well. And, you know, nurses pay, you know, this government happily voted for them not to get a pay rise and jubilantly celebrated when that happened. But care workers haven't even had a proper kind of chance for their work to be appropriately recognized. It's not right that it doesn't make any sense that in the context of an aging population, that is the demographic reality of the UK and most developed countries in the world. It doesn't make sense in the context of an aging population for the budget that gets spent on social care since 2010 to have been slashed by £700 million. It makes zero sense. And all that's done is meant the care providers have to cut costs, and the costs they cut are wages of the workers. And so there's clearly something askew here. And the politics of it comes in again when you look at the crisis. Look at how phenomenal and mind-blowing, actually, the Treasury's response was to provide these rescue packages for workers to be furloughed. Billions and billions and billions of pounds materialized overnight, right? For people who weren't going to be able to work necessarily to continue working. So I reject anybody, I don't care whether it's the Minister for Social Care, the Prime Minister himself, I reject when they say, sorry, it can't be done. And you know what? If we all have this real kind of respect and love in this country, which is right for the NHS, we have to acknowledge the relationship between social care and the NHS. They go hand in hand. If you love the NHS, you can't love it fully and properly if you don't acknowledge the importance of social care. They should have parity of esteem. And that is a political choice. Them not having parity of esteem is a political choice. And the genesis of that political choice is because the work is primarily done by women. It's really as simple as that. I mean, you know, it was the 50th anniversary last week of the Equal Pay Act, right? And that came about because of the protests that were done in the Ford factory in Dagenham, where the women who were the machinists sewing the leather covers for the seats of those vehicles suddenly had their work downskilled and downgraded as unskilled. And they protested and they went on strike and they marched, and the factory was ground to a halt. They wouldn't have been able to sell any cars if they couldn't complete the furnishing. And that resulted in, a kind of reevaluation and an appreciation of women's work. But there's no way they would have done that if it wasn't women in that aspect of the workforce. So I just feel we got to confront straight up the inherent sexism, the inequality between men and women that results in care as a profession being woefully and criminally undervalued. But we can fix it, but it will take political will. And that's the challenge.
Yeah, it is a massive challenge. And I think also with that political will, I don't know too much about politics as such, but I just feel that sometimes when you have the support that you can have from people on the ground, getting to the media, if you've noticed how they react when the media, well, apart from, Dominic Cummings, but generally when the media say we're not happy about something or we're worried about something, they'll react. Like with care homes, that was the massive story, so they quickly mustered together something for that, leaving out some of the other stuff that's going on, like personal assistants, carers. I mean, people are screaming out in terms of COVID-19 support in those areas, but it's kind of getting them engaged. And I just want to go back to some of the pictures that we have. So that's you out there just generally protesting with some
I'm usually on a march. I'm usually on some kind of march. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And also we have obviously in the press saying that urgent action needs to happen in care homes. And of course, I think that's in relation to the march that was it last weekend or the weekend before?
Weekend before, yeah. That was the very first ever kind of socially distanced protest march and rally, and we did it for care workers. Hundreds of people up and down the country took part, and we desperately wanted to find a way of expressing and amplifying these important issues whilst adhering to the social distancing rules. So the question we asked ourselves is, what does activism in the age of isolation look like? And then we came up with this template where, I mean, you can see a sign up there, which was my kind of protest sign. It says, carers don't need a badge, they need a real living wage. And then it's hashtag pay, protect, protest. And so we encourage people to use their daily exercise to head out. People look at you like you're a little bit crazy, but head out, with a placard and make your point, photograph yourself, video yourself, put it on social media with the hashtag. So we created this groundswell of people having a shared experience and expressing their outrage and fury at the situation all together in unison. And then we did a Zoom rally where we had speakers, we had protest songs being sung, we had people pledging to take action. And it was like, a bit scrappy if you were there at the rally. It felt like a real rally, actually, because, sometimes the tech was a bit funny and there was a kind of some improvisation, but it really helped people feel like they were part of something and that together we can and will be powerful about affecting change. And so what we're looking for is, to make sure that PPE is provided to everybody in care home settings or any kind of social care provision, whether it's home visits or whatever. And then we want to see a pledge from the government that no care worker will ever have to work for anything less than a living wage. But that's just the starting point. As far as I'm concerned, for such important work, a living wage needs to be the start of the conversation, and an appropriate wage that reflects the skill and importance of the work needs to be where we head to. And so we need to have out of, I talk about this crisis, we're only a few months in, so you could argue we're still in the prologue, right, of the crisis. We have to be asking ourselves, what do we want the epilogue to be? And I want us to recover from this crisis with a new acknowledgement and respect for care in all its forms, whether that's childcare, whether that's social care, whether it's unpaid care work, whether it's paid care work, because our economy is propped up by this kind of work. We have to, to use a government slogan, we have to stay alert, but we have to stay alert to the danger of us coming out of the peak of the crisis and then people and our government wanting to just revert back to business as usual, or start using the language of sacrifice, which they've used to convince us to follow the rules and stay at home and do whatever. I'm fearful, and we have to stay alert to this, that they will start using the language of sacrifice to justify why they can't or won't invest in this sector going forward. Oh, but the money's not there. The economic situation means we can't do it. No. The problem we are going to have is if we don't invest. We went into this crisis with more than 100,000 vacancies in the social care sector, yet fat cat social care homeowners making enormous profits that are sifted offshore. We need the government to take responsibility for this and move the social care sector into not necessarily full state ownership, but state stewardship, so that there are minimum protections in place that protect workers, minimum standards that preserve their working conditions and create the best possible outcomes for the people who rely on social care, which will only increase in number with an aging population. This is about investing in the type of society that we want this country to be. And so the challenge is going to be keeping the media interested and giving people mechanisms to express that this is fundamental, really important to them. And the success or failure of individual politicians will depend on their ability to do this and serve this mission properly. So, and there are other things, the immigration bill, which is going through, I think, mid-June, it'll be looked at again in Parliament. Now, a big proportion of the social care workforce are born and come from outside of the UK. They're really important. When you've got 110 vacancies anyway, pre-crisis, those workers are really important. The immigration bill as it stands, and you've heard Priti Patel talk about social care workers as low skilled. The immigration bill as it stands has an income threshold for people who can come into this country and have the entitlement to work. And that income threshold is just over £20,000. Most social care workers earn below that income threshold. And so that needs to be changed. And if it's not changed, it's the clearest signal, as if we didn't need one, that these issues aren't being taken seriously enough. So Hannon Whateley, whoever, who is it? Liz Kendall for the opposition, the Prime Minister himself, Rishi Sunak from the Treasury, Matt Hancock. We need a unified cross-party response that acknowledges the problems in the care sector and promises to do right by the British people by fixing those issues. And so it's, I mean, we got a long road ahead of us, but yeah, and go on, we can do this.
No, it's inspiring. I love everything that you're saying. And I know I have spoken to Hannon Whateley before. A few weeks before. We only had her for like 20 minutes. It was a real squeeze. So much we wanted to get through. We are going to speak to Liz Kendall as well. That's something in my inbox I need to sort out. So she's agreed to come on. We just need to diarise it. So when she comes on, I will definitely ask her about this cross-party approach. I know that she has lots of ideas about how to take things forward. And I think it's great. I mean, when they do have this cross-party approach, hopefully they will include the Women's Equality Party. I mean, that's amazing. That would be great if they could. And I'll mention that to her.
Please do.
And also, I think just like picking up on the point where you said that with the immigration rules and how much people earn, how much care workers earn, and also recognizing the fact that what can limit how much care workers can earn, especially if they are women, is the fact that, you know, I know this from working with care workers and being involved in interviewing, and a lot of people come into care because they care for other people. So they are caring. So they're either a carer themselves, or they have a young family, or they just have a family that they're also caring and supporting for. So they go into work and they care, and they come home and they care, or they can't, you know, have put in the extra hours to get that career progression that they so deserve because they're doing the care at home as well, and they just can't do both full time. So I think there's a recognition of just how complex each situation is, and then, like, coming to your point, that we need to then recognize how we support care workers with it, whether it's with pay, and there's argument for like training and careers and all this stuff that women, I feel, miss out on because they are that main carer at home as well.
And that's why I talk about state stewardship of the sector, right? And what that would mean is that, you know, a proper kind of career trajectory, career progression process will be put in place that, you know, the state has some oversight of, so that standards are what they should be, and the careers allow people who've worked, because I think there's some crazy thing I read last week that, you know, it's like 20%, 20 pence difference, the earnings of somebody that's worked for 20 years or whatever it is, or for a very long time in the care sector versus a new entrant into the care sector, which tells you all you need to know about the extent to which this work is valued. Obviously, a newcomer doesn't necessarily have the experience or the finely honed skills as someone who's done it for a long time, yet the way the system works, it doesn't allow those people's work and experience to be properly recognized. No wonder there's a huge turnover. And so there are things the government can do. It takes, frankly, not even that much imagination. It is all about the political will. And there are examples in other countries where they've got slightly different approaches to this that we can borrow. We're not starting from scratch. In Holland, they've got a very interesting approach to care work in a certain part of the social care sector, whereby everything is very much patient-centered. And so the decisions about the way care workers are treated, how they're paid and how they're trained is always linked back to the outcomes you want to get for the beneficiaries of the service, rather than in this country where the main determinant of pay, conditions, training is there the money or isn't there? And obviously there isn't the money if that money is being siphoned out of the sector or because of public cuts. So we have to shift our frame of reference. We have to make it about valuing this work and recognize that this work, as I said, is actually a real signal of the kind of society we want to be and that we believe ourselves to be. And the more we neglect it, the more, in my view, it shows that we've lost our way when it comes to what kind of country, what kind of society we ought to be, who we value, what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that thing about holding our politicians to account. So people talk about voting, but I just feel like it's so distant. It's like 4 years away. It's like really depressing. But yeah, that is one way of doing it, but also get involved in some of the wonderful work that you're doing. And I want to go back to the couple of weeks ago, because I've just noticed that one of my colleagues has uploaded the video, which you share on, well, the Women's Equality Party share on Twitter, about what, some of the experiences and thoughts around what happened with the protest that you organised a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to give this a go and see if this plays.
A third of COVID-related deaths in this country are now in care settings. I do not accept this. We do not accept this.
Pay them, give them the respect they deserve, and properly fund the care sector.
My carer and others like her, they're not heroes. What they are people that deserve pay and recognition for the skilled work that they do, because their lives and our lives are worthwhile. Until that is recognised by this government, we have to keep protesting and keep demanding better.
So that was great. That was really inspiring. And it's lovely to see that so many people engaged with it so quickly, and you got that groundswell. It's fantastic. And we need more of that. I feel we need more.
That's just the beginning. And I think we've got to be prepared to take drastic action if our demands fall on deaf ears. There's that old saying, power never concedes without a demand. So the first step is making those demands. And if necessary, a form of civil disobedience or some form of striking. And I know you have to be very thoughtful about how you do such a thing in the context of, care work or anything related to the medical profession. But actually, we've waited a long time to be completely ignored. There comes a point where, we have to be prepared to be even more kind of ambitious and amplify our own voices. And if the media get behind us and enough politicians recognize that this is something that actually is their duty to do, we got to remember we're their boss, right? The citizens elect the politicians. And so their job is to do what the people demand. And so we just have to make the case that this is something that there's broad support for, and we'll be halfway there. But it's going to take a lot of us working together and a lot of media support and backing and amplifying voices that don't get the airtime they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually going to ask you about striking, because that's something that the care sector has never heard of. So, I mean, but you see that everybody, doctors, nurses do it. I don't know it, because I think I work in it. It kind of just makes me a bit scared, but like it can be done, and it's sad that it has to be done, but it does seem like that is one thing that people do use to get their voices heard if they don't get heard going forward. And also the point that you made about we employ politicians, which is, you wouldn't if you were an alien and you came onto this planet when COVID started. You would absolutely think it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Like no matter how much we say, or even the press, like parts of the press you wouldn't even expect to champion some of this stuff, they are really going for it and being supportive. But you know, the government doesn't want to listen. And it's interesting because I can't remember which media channel it was. It might have been Double Down News or yeah, I think it was. And they did a section on YouTube about who funds the current government and that who funded their campaign and how that came about. And actually the people who they are potentially listening to, like we'll never find out, are not the people who elect them, but the people who fund them, and like the complexities around that. So, you know, even though my initial idea and thought around striking or doing protesting, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that's all a bit scary. But actually, if they're not, people aren't going to listen in government. Maybe this is something going forward we hopefully won't need to do, but we might need to do, because to get our voices heard, which is ridiculous, because in care, all you want to do is care. You don't want to not care. I mean, a lot of people I work with are incredibly selfless. Yeah. So people put other people first before that. You literally have to say to them, please take your annual leave. So it's counterintuitive to what they want to do, but they're making people have to go out and protest and have to, because of they just won't listen, which is just incredible. So I would love to hear about what are the plans for the Women's Equality Party, whether it's related to care, whether it's related to other issues that women are facing.
Well, I mean, our mission is to, like I say, move towards the world and eventually, you know, manifest a world where men and women are equal citizens. And I always say that, you know, feminism, as far as I'm concerned, is fundamentally about fairness, freedom, and everyone fulfilling their potential. So, you know, I challenge you to come up with a polite and coherent sentence that has more F words in it than that. But essentially, if you look at the crisis we're now in and what the next chapter for this country is going to be post-crisis, I feel that there is an opportunity and we can build back better, and we can build back better for women, which ultimately benefits everyone. But one of the fundamental things that has to shift is valuing care. So we will be campaigning for childcare to be properly appreciated and valued and supported centrally by the state because of the role it plays in propping up the economy. We will be campaigning for social care, as we've been discussing for the last, you know, half an hour or so. And, you know, a care-led recovery has to be what's next for this country. Otherwise, we are just going to further entrench the inequality that already exists. So we take inspiration from the women's movement in other parts of the world. In Iceland, they held a one-day strike where every single woman, you know, downed tools and just did nothing. Didn't do any of the work in the home, didn't do any of the work that was part of their paid job. And that really caused a rapid and sudden but powerful appreciation of how women are marginalized or have been marginalized. So we're looking at different ways that we could do and coordinate and galvanize something similar here in the UK. It might be that we start with people taking an hour off or something like that to make it feel manageable for people who are in professions where that might be difficult or whatever. We haven't determined it's under.
I love the day. I think go hard or go home. I love the day.
Well, I'm all for it. Yeah, Women's Day off, indeed. So that is one of the things that's in the pipeline for us. But also making the economic arguments it's going to be absolutely central that we do that. Ending violence against women and girls is a big part of the work we've always done and will continue to do, because you could argue that that kind of violence is the ultimate expression of inequality between men and women. And so we have campaigned strongly on that in the past and will continue to do so as we go forward, because it's not getting any better. And under lockdown, we've seen all sorts of horrendous things happen. We're also going to campaign for something you touched on, which is representation. Part of the problems we have seen with this government's response to the crisis is that decisions are made by a very narrow group of men. The kind of core group, the sort of war cabinets, I think they call themselves. Very macho, even calling it a war cabinet in the first place, just consists of 5 men. And then for ages, nobody knew who were the actual representatives on SAGE. But we now know that women are woefully underrepresented there too. And so I think the recovery, as we try and build back better, must be done in a way that gives equal voice to women who are 50% of the population. This government's going to have an issue with that because only a quarter of this government's MPs are female. So that underpins and underscores the challenge that we're facing here. The Labour Party does much, much better in terms of it's actually as it should be. It's on that, half and half mark for Labour Party MPs in Westminster. But in my view, you will continue to make mistakes and missteps that have powerful consequences for people's quality of life if you've got a very narrow set of perspectives round the table when decisions for the country are being made. And so it just might be that those blokes who are making the decision just can't imagine all the stuff that is so obvious to you and me because of the experience we have and the people that we communicate with and listen to day in, day out. But that needs to be corrected. So we're going to be campaigning to make sure that governments pledge and political parties pledge to not overprivilege some voices at the expense of others, which damages all of us. That's the problem. We all suffer the consequences when people's views, who are a large swathe of the population, are overlooked.
And in terms of addressing the issue, which is becoming more and more prevalent with George Floyd now across the world, Black Lives Matters has been, every part of so many cities here even have been showing the solidarity, and then relating that to the care sector. You see COVID-19 deaths that are prevalent with non-white groups. And then even when the discussions around that, you have some prejudices that come out when people sometimes talk about it. So I just think that, there needs to be an exploration. I know when I talked about our feedback to the Health and Social Care Committee for the workforce, and there's different people that collect data. There's Skills for Care that collect detail on and data on the workforce. The statistics are all there about inequalities that specifically affect non-white groups, whether that's people who are coming to this country already here. There just needs to be a lot more. There's like a subcommittee, or maybe that should be part of a whole. I don't know how to approach it, that around that subject as well. Do you think?
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, I did one of my In Conversation sessions. The most recent one was last week, and we were zooming in on these issues. And one of the things that came up was this idea of racism is actually a public health issue in and of itself. The ways in which people from different marginalized, groups, the ways in which they're marginalized are massive contributory factors to how and why they are more likely to be infected by COVID and die from COVID once they're in hospital or in other settings. And so that needs to be acknowledged, examined, and dealt with. It's no good to just say, these figures are quite alarming. What a shame. Let's wring our hands about it. We have a duty to kind of protect and support all of our citizens. And so when the data is telling us that people from certain backgrounds are suffering these are not a tiny 1 or 2 percentage points. There's a massive cavern, right, between the impacts on BAMA people generally and non-BAME people generally in this country when it comes to the disease. Therefore, there's work to be done. And the government, unfortunately, I don't know if you saw, has today said, oh, it's going to delay publication of the first report, which was going to be the conclusion of the review they've done so far to look at this issue. They said actually last night that they're delaying publication of it. Guess why, Sophie? Because they say they don't want to stoke up racial tensions. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're going to stoke up racial tensions by sitting on this report. And so, in my view, there is a fundamental problem at the heart of government. And it is more than just the fact that the representation is off. There's structural and systematic racism that, even if it's unconscious, is creating a situation where when we see these issues, those in power are not taking the action they would take if perhaps these issues affected another group. I promise you, another group.
I agree.
If, for example, I'm being provocative here, but if, for example, Eton-educated middle-class white men were having a high kind of infection and death rates related to COVID, I guarantee you we would have sorted that out, and there would be billions of pounds that would have materialized from somewhere to protect those people. And it just highlights how certain people's lives are perceived by our political establishment as less valuable than others.
Absolutely.
And that's why we're here. And women are seen in that way as a general category. People of color are seen in that way as a general category. And if you're a woman who's a person of color, you got double jeopardy on that front. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. You've got that kind of intersectionality as well. And, you know, I feel that there's a lot of people who are starting to speak openly. So we interviewed a couple of CEOs who are white males, and you know, I have actually released one of the videos, and one I'm holding on to, but I need to release it because it's kind of not relevant, but it so is. And he admits, one of them said, he got to the top of his profession. He said, I've never had an interview. And that's the thing. He's never had an interview, but he's been a CEO, he's been a counselor, he's done loads of different things. Then another person, so I asked them, you know, is there with this bias that they call it, it's just a bias, it's people call it racism, whatever, but you know, it's there. And if you're in the system, and someone else did a report called the Snowy White Peaks, which you may or may not know of, but like in the health sector, it's the Snowy White Peaks of the NHS, and they know about it, and it's led to different action within the NHS to address the issue with varying success. And people are starting to recognize, quite honestly, that there is a real issue with how people are seen, how they're promoted, how they're supported. And I just think if you're in a large organization and you literally see that somebody else is getting ahead of you and you've got so many more qualifications and you've worked so hard, and then some people say, yeah, but you just need to have more aspiration, and you're just thinking, what else can I do? It's just really disempowering. So there is just so much to tackle. And
it is. And I think the protests, you know, that have erupted over the last week since George Floyd was assassinated in the States, and the spillover here is showing that people have had enough and people are tired of lip service, which is why it's absolutely bamboozling to me that with that backdrop, they're like, oh, we're gonna delay releasing the report that's gonna give us some important intel about why racial inequality has resulted in much worse outcomes for Black people, or why nurses, last week there was a report which said nurses on the front line are significantly more likely to report not having the PPE that they need relative to white nurses. Well, that's not
wow.
coincidence. Yeah, I mean, there's data. It was an enormous survey that was done which demonstrated that was the case. And so I don't like to kind of be alarmist, but frankly, we should all be alarmed, because this is people's lives we're talking about. And if we don't respond now to these findings, I think this is the moment, I think, to really galvanize and get people to say enough is enough. And We expect the leadership of this country at all levels, whether it's in business, people who own care homes, whether it's in politics, whether it's those who have power in local authorities, to do their duty by all of us. And that is acknowledge the problem and take proactive steps to address it.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a great point to end on. It's been fantastic talking to you. I feel like we should do this again. It's been really, like, I've so enjoyed it. Makes me also think, what on earth are they hiding in that report? Like, really, that's incredible. And also definitely a shout out for everyone to get involved. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of these talks, is to try and get people listening and hearing and thinking. You had some fantastic stats that you were just drumming out there. People will hear that and think, my goodness, hopefully, and want to get involved. And we've put loads of information about how to get involved in the Women's Equality Party. And yeah, I just want to thank you really, Mandu, for spending your lunchtime with us. I'm sure you're back to back busy.
And I'm happy to come back again because, you know, we're at the beginning of trying to get this remedied. There are many steps along the way, and this is central to our mission. The Women's Equality Party will not stop until this issue is resolved and the care profession is treated with the respect and reverence it deserves, properly valued, because you saw the woman in the video, you know, care workers' lives are worthwhile, as are the lives of the people that they support. And so I believe that this is the moment, and there hasn't been a more right moment for you know, that undervaluing to be overturned and us to kind of get on the front foot, move ahead in the right way.
Lovely. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Take care.
You.
So that was Mandu Reid from the Women's Equality Party. Absolutely fantastic listening to her, talking to her, very honest opinion. You probably won't find a more honest politician right now. So yeah, really great to talk to her. All the links of how to get involved with them are in the description, or we put them in the chat. So do make sure that you kind of get involved with that. You can listen back to this, you can share it, you can tell your friends. So do that if you can. Do on all the social medias. You can just copy this link and share. And if you can support us, we are, you know, we're just doing this. Most of us are either volunteers or we have an apprentice that helps us here. We also have people who work in social care who help us kind of get these interviews out and do other things that we're doing. So yeah, support us by just clicking on the like or share or subscribe and the bell. It's like just a few clicks, it's nothing. Then just another shout out again for the survey that we're doing. And that is to feed our views, people who work in social care, their views on the workforce, how we need to support it. We talked a lot about the workforce today. So you might have inspired some thoughts that you just want to get on paper. It says the survey takes 6 minutes. So if you have 6 minutes, maybe you've got a 5 minutes, add another 1 minute, and it's not much, is it? So just please do support us if you can. And follow us on Twitter at CoproCare, and anything that we're doing, all the videos, we just put everything on there, regularly tweeting. And of course, Chat for Care. If you're on the hashtag of chat for Care, then we'll pick up some of the questions. And that's pretty much it now for this Chat for Care. It's been a bit of a long one actually, but I think it was necessary. And then on Thursday we are back again, and it's jam-packed. So I'm not expecting everyone to be with us all day, but we just happen to be doing these live streams because they record fantastically and they're live. We don't have to edit them, and you know, none of us really have time to even do this, so that makes it easiest for us. But so we'll have Toby Lowe. So anyone who is involved in commissioning, Toby Lowe has a fantastic idea about how we commission services for care differently. So his idea is about human learning systems, and there's those three components. Yes, components. That's what I said. To it. So you've got the human part of it. He's going to discuss how the learning part and the system side of it. So I find him a fantastic speaker. I learned a lot just by looking him up on YouTube. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from him on Thursday. That'll be Thursday morning. And also on the evening, Chat for Care at 7 o'clock, we'll be talking to Care England's CEO, Martin Green. And that'll be followed by the new CEO, relatively new now, Una Smith, and she's from Skills for Care, and she'll be talking to us about all that they're doing to support the sector, registered care managers, how they're supporting them with training and everything else. So please do get involved if you can. If you like us, if you share, all that kind of stuff, and then you'll just get notifications of when we go live. So take care, everyone. Really looking forward to seeing you hopefully on Thursday. Get commenting, get sharing, and we'll see you on Thursday for another Chat for Care.